Alrighty.
Check it out.
Right.
For the big one.
I believe we are ready to go. So special thanks to Ben and Marissa for last week while I was away at the NIT basketball tournament. Thanks for hosting the weather briefing last week. And this week, scrambled around a little bit, but we were fortunate enough to find Rich Grumm and Paul Knight for the weather briefing this week. So let's get it away.
Well, thanks for showing up. Welcome to April. It's been kind of an interesting month. A little bit of snow. The thing about snow in April, it doesn't last long. And if it's cold enough in the morning, it doesn't stick to your skis. So it's been a kind of cold early spring. You may have noticed that if you've gone outdoors. But when the sun comes out and the winds die, it can be pretty warm here. It gets warm pretty fast. We have potential of being pretty warm tomorrow, as you'll see. And maybe some snow before it gets warm. And we're supposed to be about in the mid-50s this time of year, and the night's supposed to be generally above freezing. So the high latitude block over Northwest North America has really been semi-persistent now for about a month. So we've had a pretty sustained period of generally below normal temperatures, which helps maintain a trough of East North America, which keeps us kind of cold. But longer range forecasts suggest there's a change in the wind. I don't know if there's an answer in the wind too. Anyway, shorter term issues, short waves and some precipitation, more normal heights and lower tropospheric temperatures are generally cold. So we've had a somewhat delayed spring, although I noticed this morning some of the leaves, some of the trees in my yard, the buds haven't budded, but they're really, really fat. They're starting to look like me.
They look great. They look great.
So the large scale pattern, we have this plot with this ridge that's been kind of stuck up here for several weeks now. You probably remember it formed a big ridge formed over Greenland back at the end of February and got us kind of cold, got Europe really cold, and then kind of quasi-retrograded. It's been stuck in northern Canada, keeping lower heights over Central North America, keeping us on the cold side. So we're pretty much below normal. This is the GEFS analysis of 6Z, and at 850 you can see we're really kind of chilly, and it's kind of impressive to see blobs of minus 20 degrees Celsius air come into the northern Great Lakes. But if you're out on a boat, it can get pretty warm in the Atlantic Zone. But of course, the April sun is your friend. If we can get the sun out, it kind of warms up pretty good. It mixes. And yesterday, every time the sun came out, we had good mixing, and we ended up with snow flurries and stuff. But the GFS, the NACE, the GFS all kind of imply that the ridge is going to break down over time. So this is the GFS on the surface, and you can see underneath that upper level ridge is a huge massive area of above normal pressures and high latitudes. There's a high over us too, and there's that low that came through and gave us all the fun wind and rain and snow flurries. No precipitation on the surface. So here's a quick look from the 6Z GEFS, and you can see, forecasting the day now abnormally cold here. It's supposed to be in the mid-30s here. The GEFS generally in 2 meter temperatures, if you notice when the sun's out in the wintertime and in the spring, has a horrible cold bias. But generally speaking, it's supposed to warm up tomorrow after a cold night, maybe a little bit of snow or rain. But if the sun comes out, it's going to be in the 50s tomorrow. And then it has a cold day over the weekend, and it shows it moderating back up. But none of the GEFS 2 meter temperatures, the high temperatures never get to our normal high for the next week. But you can see at 850, we kind of stay below freezing throughout the period in most members. There's a few oddballs here, probably why there's some rain over here, and there's a few here. But the end of the week is a lot of uncertainty. I have no confidence in the forecast about the 11th, but the reason that the model, of course, has rain is because the boundary layer may be too warm. But clearly, it's cold enough aloft. This was January; these would all be no-brainer snow events that we're looking at, and it's pretty darn cold at 700. And so the local issues the next 7 days is this northwest flow. We have this clipper that comes by in the next 24 hours. But if you follow the rule of clippers, we don't do good in State College when the clippers go across Ontario and Quebec. A lot of times they bring in warm air too, which is actually forecast tomorrow. We're supposed to get some warm air, a surge of warm air here tomorrow. And there's another wave, of course, in the southern stream, which if you were following the guidance a couple days ago, it looked like there was a potential snow this weekend, and people in the DC area and southern Pennsylvania get all excited about it. But for us, it looks like it's going to be a miss now in the ensembles. But so it's a pretty active looking week coming up next 7-8 days. And this is the precipitation shield for the event that's supposed to occur basically overnight tonight, and then actually there's a break as the wave goes by, and then the front comes. So there's actually, we'll see this kind of two potentials for precipitation with this event. First with the clipper itself, and then the cold frontal passage. But you can see the QPF amounts, even though we're looking at 0.1 inches of rain or snow, and it's almost 100%. But it's just a tenth of an inch of liquid over the entire period of time. So it's not a game breaker here. So, and then this just shows the temperatures. You can see I picked kind of the midpoint of the forecast, like, and it's tomorrow afternoon. You can see that next Arctic kind of April-ish Arctic looking front kind of deal coming through. There's actually minus 18 contours on the lakes, which is pretty respectable for April. So if we got any precipitation, probably mostly be snow. Then the front part, it could be rain. Depends how fast the boundary layer cools down and go over to snow. So the weekend event is the weekend event that is going to be a near miss. The storm's supposed to slide off. This is the GFS off to our south. Some models had better runs. If you look at individual models, I think that's why somebody put out a map for big snowfall in southern United States about 3 days ago. People getting excited about snow in the DC if you read the Washington Post. But you can see it's really cold here. We'd be about minus 10 to minus 12 if we get precipitation this weekend. But we'll probably mix out. We'll probably be I don't know, in at least the 40s, upper 30s, 40s over the weekend, even despite the deep blue colors. And the QPF shield just stays well suppressed to our south if you believe the GEFS. So the weekend storm is kind of a miss. And then there's a storm that this is all 6Z GEFS and GFS data and NAICS data. There's a storm that's kind of in the Monday, Tuesday time frame off the coast. This actually is one of the better looking forecasts. There's a lot of uncertainty. Some of them have the low coming up into Maryland, but in the mean, the low's offshore. But there's no big high to the north, so it's not deep easterly flow. So the low probably wasn't going to be a big effect to us. And again, this was an event that some people were talking about a big potential rain, snow in the eastern United States, but it doesn't look as exciting. If you look at the QPF shield for a ½ inch of precipitation, it's well displaced to our east. It looks though like overall we could get maybe 1.1, 0.2 inches of liquid in the mean. That's maybe, who knows, but it's not that great a signal, I don't think. The only thing that works in our favor in this event is whenever there's cyclones off the east coast of the United States in the cold season, they tend to verify north and west of the forecast. So if you still like snow and wet and cold weather, there's some hope. But I wouldn't get too excited. And then you can see it would be cold enough for snow. It would probably be like in between about -4 and -6 if that came. So I guess I'd be more excited if I lived in Jersey, maybe. But of course, I would rather be outside this time of year. I wouldn't want to be wrapped up in a coat like Marissa. So late next week and weekend, is there a potential warm up in a Midwest severe event? If you look at the NAICS, look at an ensemble, would say it doesn't look very impressive. 52 member ensemble kind of washes it all out. But I don't know what the 12Z GEFS said. But the GFS, the single GFS, had a really good surge of warm air up into the mid-Mississippi Valley, and it actually had between 400 and 1800 joules per kilogram at Cape. So it looked like a potential severe weather event, maybe breaking out to our west, maybe Friday, Saturday next week. But the ensembles, of course, there's so much uncertainty, it doesn't kind of show that signal. So we'll just look quickly at alternate tab here and see if we can find. Maybe I'll have to go like this. Navigating the laptop is really hard. Look at the href, for example. And I guess if I go F11, is it on here? Get full screen. So this is the 12Z NCEP href, and it shows the probability of precipitation type being snow. So let me get this to the beginning. We get our bearings. And I guess this is ours at 13Z, because they don't show the 0-hour forecast. So it looks like if we had any precip in the area this morning, it would be, probability would be snow. The probabilities, unfortunately, don't quite. Let's see if I can use the arrows instead. There's a probabilities in the bottom. But it look like any precip around here would mostly be snow. Some areas with the precip slide would probably be rain because of boundary layer issues. But the chance of snow lifts out today is forcing it a little weaker. And then we see this kind of like more elongated band of snow coming in with a little shortwave that's supposed to come in overnight. This is 4Z, and you can see overnight this band of precipitation with some potential snow. For the most part, passes to our west. It clearly goes through us. And then as the day progresses tomorrow in the afternoon, so I'm thinking tomorrow if I can get on I might be able to bicycle lunchtime tomorrow. Doesn't get too windy. There's a chance of course, snow coming in with the cold front. So the clipper comes by, and it's not an ideal situation for us. And then the front comes by. So we have two chances of precipitation. Clearly, high probability in this model it would turn to snow. But if we look at the probability of rain, we'll just go, we'll mean probability greater than, they don't have a tenth on this page. But we'll just look at the probability of precipitation, I guess. Let it step by. Perfect. There's 13 Z today. And you can see, even though it was showing snow around here today, it wasn't a lot. It was just trace amounts. But we can see, as we step forward this afternoon, you can see over Chicago, there's actually some measurable precipitation beginning to show with that clipper. And then it comes across Michigan. It actually gets a little bit more intense when we get into the second zone. And if I slide down here, you can see we're still talking about 0.01, 0.05. This is not a big precipitation event. I think it's only like 10 members of this ensemble. It's not a really robust ensemble, but you can see the heaviest snow on a few tenths of an inch of liquid go across like Western New York and up into Canada, and we don't get a lot of precipitation. So, and then with the front, you can see if we get some streaky convective-looking precipitation at the end of at the limbs of this forecast. So this isn't a big precipitation event coming up for the week, and it could get actually quite warm here. And, let's see. Somehow I highlighted everything. There's not a lot to show you from the HER on this. Surface aviation, 2 meter temperatures. What are the mean 2 meter temperatures? If I can get that window to go away. So these are the 2 meter temperatures. 13 today. Pretty chilly for this time of year. We're not going to get out of the 30s, which is really cold for here. I was 20. What was the low here on campus? I was 25. I wish I was 25. My temperature was 25. My Jewish wish I was 25. So you can see we don't really get out of the 30s here. And then you can see as we move into Friday, we get into these nice mustardy looking colors and really warming up a little bit. And I guess they did this scale still in Celsius, but so it looks like we can probably be in the upper 40s here tomorrow. Of the frontal system. You can see the front, as the wave goes by, you can actually see the front's way back in the middle. We can take a look and see, and then we'll let Paul take over. I gotta hit F11 again. If the GEFS has started to come in for today. I reloaded. What it did. So the GEFS has not come in. I guess it's the 12Z cycles just coming in. But if we look at the latest guidance we have from a larger scale ensemble would be from the SREF. And the SREF has a 2 meter temperatures. I don't like the SREF for QPF, but it's 2 meter temperatures usually a little bit more realistic. And we got a little, see the model said to be snow outside. We got some fluffies going on behind you. So, but the SREF actually says we could probably pop up into the low to mid 50s tomorrow, at least the low 50s tomorrow. And then of course it cools down because that wave comes to the south, more clouds, a little more cold air comes in. But we can warm up ahead of that front that's supposed to come in behind that clipper tomorrow if you believe the SREF. I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes the 2 meter temperatures in the SREF can run 5-6 degrees warmer than the GEFS. The GEFS always gets crushed on that. And if we look at the QPF from the this is the 9Z SREF, unfortunately. It's got a little bit of light precipitation early in the morning tomorrow, probably while we sleep. Most of us are getting up to work to be over. Probably a light snow, maybe a coating of snow. And then the boundary layer is warm in this SREF, so it shows when the front comes through sometime later in the day, we get another shot at some rain that's going to end in snow. And then it's got some suggestion of a precipitation event over the weekend, but the SREF has such a huge spread, I wouldn't put any credence in it. I think it's more interesting to look at the SREF for Baltimore. You can see in Baltimore, it's showing that that event that we saw up the coast could affect them, even it's diminishing for them, and it mostly has kind of bluish and cyan colors suggesting snow or sleet. But what's amazing about this is really kind of cool, is the SREF is forecasting temperatures in the 60s in Baltimore tomorrow with potential for snow on Saturday. So it is a roller coaster if you like roller coasters. We'll go back to the... So I'll put this back in view mode. I don't know if I can see the bottom of this. So I have some links here. I think the href-v2 is pretty good. And if anybody uses the GSD HER, in every 6 hour window goes out to like 30 hours, and I think in 3 hour window. So if the hours are divisible by 3 but not 6, it'll go I think, to 24 hours now. And then all the hours that have a modulus of 1 when you divide by 3, they only have an 18-hour forecast. These links are usable. And as I already showed you, this thinks there'll be some precipitation snow. But anyway, the cold weather is going to continue at least through the middle of next week. There's at least 3 short waves that are going to affect us in some way or the other. But most of the significant ones are going to either, the first one passes to our north, the second 2 are going to pass to our south. And there's some hints of moderation late next week. If you go through the NAICS, you'll see there's no blocking ridge over North America next week, which is hope. And I think Paul will talk about that more. And so, anyway, and then of course the GFS says maybe there'll be some interesting weather in the Midwest, maybe Friday, Saturday next week. But the ensemble is, of course, not as robust because there's a lot of uncertainty. So, any questions? Any answers? So I guess I'll turn it over to Paul. I'm going to sit and eat all the cookies. Need a bigger screen on that. Yeah. I dragged it up, that's what I had to do.
I think that's 5.
5. Okay. So Rich, of course, was covering the next week. I said day 1 through 5. I'm covering, in honor of Fred, the misty, distant future in this part of the discussion. It's nice to acknowledge the fact that it's been 6 years since Ken passed away, and he, of course, was a very strong advocate for having harmony between the 3 different parts of the weather enterprise. You know, the private sector, AccuWeather, and of course the government sector, the public sector, the Weather Service, and of course the academic sector here. And it's nice to see that even after 6 years that we're still continuing that tradition. So God rest your soul, Ken. Here's a view. Of course, Fred brings it up on the e-wall here regularly, but I had to freeze it from my ACES files. And you know, the Punxsutawney made his forecast back on the 2nd of February, and of course we ended up with a fairly mild February, especially the second half of the month. But it turned out, of course, that starting on March 1st, we're having 6 weeks of winter. So you know, eventually these things are right, even if they're off by a couple of weeks. In case you're wondering, when was the last time we've had a long cold period? Of course, we had that cold period for 3 weeks in December into early January. But you know, it's easy to forget the fact that last summer was actually kind of cool. The majority of the days, it started actually, the cool spell started right around the solstice, and then it continued all the way until the middle part of September. So there were very few days. The majority of those 90 days or so averaged below seasonal normals during last summer. So to say, you know, I think it's easy to miss the fact that we've had cold snaps or cool snaps of long duration, even in this period where it's been quite warm. One way to start to look at the days in the misty distant future is we could just take, this is the 60, 384 hour, which of course just flips around like anything, and just look at a single model run. And if we were to take this literally, which I would never do, you'd say the pattern doesn't change very much because there's a ridge out over the Rockies, and there's a trough in the east, and a trough just off the northwest coast. However, remember that winters can have these amazing comebacks, as they did with the storm that we had this past Monday. And potentially, there was a time over the past few days when the guidance was indicating potentially a fairly good East Coast cyclone. Now the orientation, as Rich was mentioning, of the early next week cyclone looks like it'll be primarily offshore. But there is a bias. We know that for the models to be perhaps too far east because the baroclinic zone is backing up toward the coast. I think those of you who were around to remember, there was actually a blizzard conditions on the 6th of April, 1982. in New York. So it is quite possible, even though this storm produced, what was it, 4.5 inches in New York City or something like that. I don't remember this one this past Monday. It's not as unprecedented as it may seem. In fact, in '82, that was a horrifically cold start to the month of April.
On April 5th, 1975, the office card here had a max of 27
Is that right?
and a min of 21.
Wow. Actually, that was just, and Dean Kerr probably remembers this. He was from Cornell, Doug Hayne.
Yeah.
He was giving the colloquium of the seminar on that day because it was just a wicked cold, and it was windy as all get out too. Because I remember he came down here and thought, "Oh, good grief, what's this guy bring with him?" Yeah, but Doug Payne was giving the colloquium in those days.
There was another remarkable April day in 81.
Could have been 81.
81,
With sun? Was it a sunny day?
sunny day, 100% of possible sunshine, which was roughly 13 hours,
Mhm.
and the max was 28.
Wow. Wow.
I didn't think it was possible.
Well, that old adage, as the days lengthen, the cold strengthens. So that has some validity. Well, I decided to. John did a really nice XYZ last week, and I went online and captured this because he was showing when was the last time, or how often is the month of March colder than the month of February, which is pretty rare. So he did the homework for me. I decided to then capitalize on it. And look back at what was April like the following. So here's April 1915, one of those years, and surprisingly, it was a torrid April because we hit 90 on 2 occasions, and there were only 10 days that were below normal, 6 days above 80. 1932 had no days above 80, 6 days in the 70s, and 20 days below normal. So that was quite the opposite. 1960 was one of those years. 8 days above 80, so we're going the other direction, and 12 days that were below normal for the entire month. 84 is one of those years, no days above 80, and 20 days below average, and just last year was one of those cases where March was colder than it was in February, and we had no days above 80, but 11 days below average in this period. So if you look at it just from an analog viewpoint, I'm not going to just talk about analog, but one angle to take is that 40%, there's a 40% chance of a warm spell with days of getting into the 80s, at least in the second half of April, because 2 of those 5 years had days in the 80s. And we'll come back to this in just a little bit. The last freeze should be around the 19th of April, at least according to records here at the University Weather Station. There's other ways to look at this in terms of the dynamic models, and this is a outlook that is a calibrated blend of the ECMWF and the CFS V2 using what's called a trendline climatology. So this was to give you some idea, and this is from my colleagues at Prescient. So this is the work of John Dutton and Richard James and Jeremy Ross. And this is the outlook, the most recent one for week 3 and then week 4. April 16th to 22nd, and then April 23rd to April 29th. And the probabilities of this is actually the anomalies, the forecast mean ensemble anomaly. And the pattern still shows what would look like the cold hanging at least, or backing up in week 3 into the Pacific Northwest, and then also starting to spill back in fact, a chunk of cool air trying to come to the east during the last week of April. Is there any skill in this method? And actually, the statistics show that at least for the 15 or 16-year period, lead week 3, North America landmass only, that we're just talking about how often do we get the signal right? Is it above normal or is it below normal? Surprisingly, comparing the CFS versus the ECMWF versus this World Climate Service multi-model blend and calibrated, that there's there's some skill, at least getting the sign right, even in March, April, or May, of order of 65% of the time. That's not bad. Remarkable. It's almost 70% in the summertime. But then again, persistence is a big factor there. The Weather Service, Climate Prediction Center, has been making incremental progress toward getting a week 2-3 forecast out. This is the week 2 forecast, so this is from the 11th to the 17th. Temperature on the left, precip on the right, and continuing to show at least some cool air coming in to the eastern part of the country during that period. And I decided to look at the experimental work that's done, and of course we had a really sharp graduate student in the, I guess it was in the 90s, was Paul Roundy was here, maybe early 2000. Yeah, left here, and I think he's pretty much parked himself up at Albany, hasn't he? And Roundy does some really interesting work. Of course, his primary focus was on the MJO and the wave frequencies in the tropics as being a potential way of predicting, using a neural network, what the flow pattern will be like at the extratropics. And he has a neural network approach that reconstructs the upper air flow pattern. Now, this looks terrible. I'm not sure why he designed it this way, but this is North American here. The blue contours would be low heights, 500 millibar height anomalies, and then the red would be high heights. This is on the 29th of April. Of course, you can step through it. It goes all the way to the, I think it was the 5th of May. It goes out for 30 some odd days. And that methodology actually predicts that there would be a trough still in the eastern part of the U.S. at the end of April and a ridge in the Rockies or even into the western central part of Canada. Is that any validity? Well, when it comes to this week 2, 3, 4 forecast, at this point, whatever skill can be extracted is primarily related to a blend of different methods, because the dynamic models have yet to really prove themselves to be worthwhile, and the statistical models or even neural networks show some skill. Analogs are give or take. So my summary is that in this period, April 11th to 30th, so I'm picking up from where Rich left off, I expect more than half the days will average above normal. I just think that the pattern is changing. I do believe that the block, which was there for what will end up being 6 weeks this weekend, will break down. And I think is likely to have a marked warm spell with readings, I do believe, can get to 80 here, or even above, during the first half of this period, so the April 11th to 21st. And I'm calling upon the dynamic blend that we have from the World Climate Service model. And then another cold snap during the second half, so April 22nd and 30th, which should be consistent with even what we're seeing in the neural network forecast. So the chill will break sometime between the 11th and the 20th, and then I think the cool will come back again at the end of the month. Since we're in such a seesaw pattern, that would likely favor some soggy storms too. So although we've not had a lot of precipitation, it's been noticed because it's been in the form of snow. But I think that unless what may happen on Monday or Tuesday next week may be the onion snow. The sapling bender was this past Monday, so we're due for the onion snow, and then it's goodbye. And I couldn't help but use this. Those of you who are parents or grandparents. Yeah, it kind of says it all. When it comes to weather forecasting, there's always an exception to every rule that we have. And in this case, why is it 364 days a year we say to the kids, what are you doing eating something on the ground? And then of course on Easter egg hunt, let's go out and find food that strangers have left for us that's on the ground. So anyway, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I worked last evening. It's interesting that they got so much cold, dry air in here. What little snow fell from Innovation Park westward actually iced up Interstate 80 and 99.
Is that right? I did see the alert that went out around 12:20 last night. Yeah. It is pretty surprising that there were Were there any accidents? I didn't see
Yes.
it. There were some.
Wow.
Yes, Steve.
What kind of calibration are used on the models for doing the 2 to 3 week kind of model blend?
Well, it's the ensemble of both, the ECMWF and the CFSV2. And the calibration is primarily the most recent 10 years to correct for the biases, because there's different biases in the models. There's the internal bias, and there's also the bias relative to the change in climate we're in too. And both of those are incorporated in there. That's why I think we were able to extract some skill from the guidance. Although the more specific one tries to get the the Heisenberg uncertainty principle here. The more we try to pin it down as a particle, the less we know about the weight. So, other comments or questions? Okay. Well, there are cookies here, so please enjoy them. My wife made them.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's give our speakers a round of applause for today. All right, next week we'll have Dave Don back. Thank you.
Anyway, 4 to 11 or so.